Potential, latent qualities or abilities that may be developed and led to future success or usefulness. In the series of Kuroko no Basket, the Generation of Miracles have the highest potential ceiling among all of the characters in the show, but who among them actually has the highest latent potential ceiling? Let's talk about it today. Now, when I say potential or latent potential, what I'm saying is who has the highest ceiling, assuming none of these characters actually stop progressing to their peaks. Now, normally I would start with Kuroko, the Phantom 6 member of the Generation of Miracles. However, I think it's pretty clear that he's just not going to have the highest potential ceiling out of all of these characters, even putting aside his use of the misdirection technique and how he incorporates that with different abilities he garners throughout the show. In terms of physicality or as a basketball player, there is just far more of a case for the other GOM members than there is for Kuroko. Many players and characters throughout the series have just noted he's very ordinary when it comes to playing ability. It's actually noted in the first chapter of the Kuroko manga by Riko Ado, the coach of the Siren's Boys basketball club, who is able to visualize numbers representing your physical abilities. Someone like Kagami, who is much closer in terms of natural talent to the Generation of Miracles, is noted to be a natural born talent, and someone Ada can't even tell how much potential he has. Compare this to Kuroko, who on top of being below average at every stat, is actually noted to have practically reached his max potential already. Hence why Kuroko is mainly improving in terms of technique throughout the show. But in terms of how much more talented he could become, he's just not comparable to Kagami or the other Generation of Miracle members. Next up, we have the shooting guard of the Generation of Miracles, that being Midorima. Midorima is kind of weird to discuss in this category, especially compared to other Miracle Generation players. He doesn't really change too much throughout the series or acquire new moves really. His main focus, especially in preparation for his rematch against Siren, was to increase his stamina to match Kagami's jumping ability, turning it into a match of attrition rather than trying to counter Kagami's jumping ability, which was a bad matchup for his high projectile three-pointer. He's one of the few characters we actually don't have a metric for in terms of talking about his potential in relation to the other GOM members. Obviously, it would be extremely high via virtue of him being in the group itself. However, when you consider that even from the middle school days, he's always been improving and showing up to practices, it essentially means that he's had the most room to grow as he's practiced much more than the other members who could be considered stronger, with air quotes, than Midorima, such as Aomine, who, for example, couldn't be cut through with the same vanishing drive from Kuroko that was effective on Midorima. The idea that other GOM members are still just as threatening or of a similar caliber despite practicing less even as far back as the middle school days does lead into the idea that his potential ceiling isn't quite as high, as he's been trying to reach it for far longer. So in terms of who has the highest potential ceiling, I don't think Midorima quite has the best case. The next character to discuss is Akashi Sejiro. This may be surprising considering Akashi is commonly regarded as top dog among the GOM, but you have to look at it as two parts. Akashi is a very ability-based player and physically isn't quite as imposing as the other Generation of Miracle players. This is noted by players such as Kagami when Akashi switches back with his other personality, or in his zone state where GOM members such as Aomine would be a superior scorer or Murasaki Bara would be a better defender. But with the Emperor, that allows him to bridge the gap and put him above those two. Akashi is in a weird place though, since he's always in a divided state, or is in a divided state for most of the series. This is due to how Akashi's psyche was split up into two personalities, splitting his abilities up as well. I'm of the opinion while Akashi obviously progressed as a basketball player into the Winter Cup, with him even discovering his own trigger for the zone, being able to enter it on command, the Emperor in of itself didn't improve to a significant extent, as the GOM members don't make any distinct notes about it being an improved variation from the middle school days. But what is interesting is that his passing ability does get leveled up due to the Emperor once the personalities switch back in the end of the Winter Cup. We do see in the extra last game when both personalities are merged together, the abilities fuse as well, allowing Akashi to see the future of every player on the court, allowing him to overtake Nash Jr., who was nigh unstoppable up until this point in the game. Given the idea that Akashi's Emperor didn't really improve in the actual show, or we don't have any direct statements of it improving, it's likely that his future sight wouldn't improve either, and that would be the finalized version of the ability, meaning there wouldn't be that much more room for him to grow following this point. The main difference coming from his physical ability, in which the other GOM members are far more formidable. So I'm of the opinion that Akashi likely wouldn't be able to improve, at least with his Emperor, that much more, and due to him physically not holding up to the other GOM members, they have a greater case to say they have a higher potential ceiling. This is also also partially due to the fact that Akashi just kind of forced his own evolution in a weird way, especially when you look at the awakening of his Emperor compared to the other members who had to naturally progress and blossom into their own talents. It can obviously still be a bit up to conversation, but I do think there are better cases for the other players having higher potential peaks, such as Aomine, one of the top contenders for this discussion and the ace of the GOM. Aomine is in a weird position just due to the fact that he was the first to blossom from the middle school days and completely fell off as a result of that, meaning that everything that's happening in the original show is Aomine just falling off and using the skills he garnered during middle school. Even when all of the other GOM members are training for the Winter Cup, Aomine is noticeably just not training or practicing in any regard, which is very relevant since even players like Murasaki Bara, who stopped showing up to practices alongside Aomine, was still practicing notably hard for the Winter Cup, despite having a more lax attitude towards practice as a whole even during high school. Aomine was essentially the first to blossom, became too good, and then just stopped practicing completely. And I think this is represented with his feats later on when he actually does begin practicing again, such as when we see him in the extra or last game, being the only player not subbed out on Team Vorpal Swords, and even throwing the zone into the mix, which is a huge stamina drain. Aomine was able to play the full duration of the game. So he's obviously a top contender as he's just operating off of the skills garnered during the middle school days, and when he's actually playing or practicing again, he's able to rack up great feats in the extra or last game. A lot of this is relevant in the Winter Cup as well, as due to Aomine never really playing seriously, his own instincts had been dulled but are slowly coming back in the match against Kagami. This being the case, despite Aomine playing other GOM members like Kisei or actually playing seriously in the first half of this match, causing Kagami to have pure respect for Aomine and the heights he'd reach as a basketball player. Especially in terms of basketball skill, Aomine is definitely a top contender. I do think there are other acceptable answers depending on the criteria you're using. Murasaki Bara is one of them, who has a more direct statement in reference to this discussion. It's noted by Kisei post Aomine match pretty directly that Murasaki Bara has the most latent energy out of the Miracle generation by a mile, and in terms of pure ability, he might just be the strongest. This really shouldn't be surprising since when Murasaki Bara removed the subconscious mental restriction he had placed on himself, he was able to go toe-to-toe with Jason Silver of all people, competing with him in not just power but in terms of speed. Keeping in mind, Jason Silver only really gets eclipsed by zone players. It's pretty ridiculous. Murasaki Bara is kind of similar to Aomine, where he stopped practicing at least in middle school, but was more proactive in his training leading up to the Winter Cup. So on top of being similar to Aomine and just not being as motivated, although not to maybe the same extent, he also had this limiter on himself where he's never really been able to play at 100%. I'm of the opinion this is more so in reference to physical ability, which other characters make pretty clear, at least in reference to Murasaki Bara, meaning you might be able to say things like Aomine is a superior basketball player, but in terms of physical ability, Murasaki Bara has a higher ceiling, which I do think is being conveyed here. There is a lot of consistency though. If you're looking at these players as a whole, the two players who have practiced the least, at least in comparison to the other GOM members, have higher ceilings due to them being more naturally talented. Hence, they've scratched a lower part of their potential ceiling and have a lot more room to grow if they actually took training and practicing a lot more seriously. So in terms of physicality or pure physical stats, I would say Murasaki Bara. In terms of basketball as a whole, I might lean towards Aomine, but what if I told you there was an X factor in this discussion? My personal contender for number one is Kisei. When you consider that Kisei has only been playing basketball for 2 years and was the last to join the generation of miracles, his growth throughout the series makes a lot of sense compared to other characters who have blossomed much earlier on. It's stated in Kaijo vs. Toho that Kisei doesn't have any less potential than Aomine, which puts Kisei in the conversation on its own, but also helps add to why his growth throughout the series is so severe, going from the weakest GOM member to at one point being the strongest on the court in the extra or last game. What makes Kisei stand out on top of this is him being a mix of Murasaki Bara and Aomine, in that he has the capacity to eternally add basketball skills to his arsenal if his body can pull them off. A Kisei at his full potential would have the stamina to pull off a perfect copy for the entirety of the game. This is more so Kisei's age limiting him, as all of the Generation of Miracle players have to be careful to not unleash their full abilities, as they can injure themselves as they're too talented beyond what their bodies can handle. Kisei is no different, even in replicating the moves the other GOM members perform. This is to say though, if his body is able to progress, he will just be able to eternally mimic what these other players can do, such as him, for example, being able to mimic Aomine's entire playstyle beat by beat in his match against him. Full potential Kisei would just have the body to be able to use perfect copy for the entirety of the game, and not just the short 5-minute window he's able to use it. It would essentially replace the existing arsenal of being able to replicate other players' moves. The only thing stopping him from actually performing this feat is, well, his body. In my opinion, I think the top 3 in discussion are Aomine, Kisei, and Murasaki Bara, with Kisei being the middle ground in that he could just adapt all of the Generation of Miracles moves into his playstyle. I think this makes sense too, since it's noted that Kisei actually stopped coming to practice or was falling off the basketball wave, as there's a distinct comparison noted to the wind and how he hears it when he's bored before he found basketball, and in that he actually begins modeling again and actually skips practice, which is shown to us during the middle school days. He's also one of the first to actually begin practicing seriously after losing to Kagami, so him having this growth does make quite a bit of sense. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you agree, disagree, why? Like the video and subscribe if you enjoy Kuroko no Basket content. Who do you think has the most latent potential among the Generation of Miracles? I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye!